established criteria for determining what constitutes a minor variance. And then in addition to that, there's a separate set of criteria or guidelines that are to be followed by the delegate to consider when issuing DVP. The Act also states, not surprisingly, because I think this is pretty standard practice, but any property owner who has a decision that's subject to delegation has the ability to have that decision reconsidered by the board. Interestingly, the province has determined that there is no notification requirements required for variances that are deemed to be minor. However, and this is the second part of the slide here is just a reminder kind of for other DVPs, the RDOS would still be required to give standard notice. Nothing has changed in the Act in that respect. So the date that the permit would be considered by the board, the land affected, and then notification of adjacent property owners and residents, which we here at the RDOS do a 100-meter radius for. So before I get into proposed criteria and guidelines, I just wanted to give the board a sense of some of the recent history with DVPs. So the period that I chose to look at was from 2013 to 2021. And the basis for the 2013 start date was the introduction of the consent agenda, which I believe started on June 20th of 2013. And it was a way to kind of streamline the board's considerations of DVPs and to allow those, quote unquote, deemed to be of a generic nature or that need no discussion to be dealt with quickly at the beginning of the meeting. DVP applications, or I guess land use applications in general, that were seen to be more controversial or of a wider interest were to continue to be listed separately on the board's regular agenda. And my understanding is that the practice for excluding something from consent, subject to obviously a director having an interest in that particular application, has either been a negative recommendation from staff or when representations opposing the variance have been received. Now, I have a number of slides with stats on them, but before I go into those stats, I just wanted to highlight that we don't or haven't historically maintained detailed information on DVPs. So compiling the stats that I'm about to present was done by staff manually over the last 6 to 7 months. And I just wanted to highlight that, to the best of our ability, going back through the old records, we compiled what we think are pretty accurate stats, but they may not be complete. So just keep that in mind, but I do think they provide a fairly good indication of how things have gone over the last 8 years. So since the consent agenda, we've issued, or the board has considered 275 different DVP applications. I'm not going to spend too much time here, and if the board is interested, I can post a link to this PowerPoint after the meeting if you want to see or spend more time looking at these stats. We broke them down by electoral area, so you can get a sense here of where most of the activity is happening. At the top end is electoral area E, followed by D, and at the lower end is area G, which is just basically a reflection of the minimal amount of zoning in that particular electoral area. We also look at where DVPs have been submitted or asked to be considered by zone type. And again, here, probably not too much of a surprise. Low density residential is hands down the predominant location of DVPs. I think it's over 50%, followed by agriculture and the small holding zones. By type of variance requested. So again, probably not a surprise for directors who have been on the board since 2013. So the principal types are generally setbacks, building height, followed by retaining wall and parcel coverage. Oops. So just some summary observations on those previous slides. So we have been receiving on average about 31 DVPs a year. I put the asterisk there because in the last couple of years, that number has increased significantly. I think we received 60 last year, and we're on track for 60 again this year if things don't change. As I was just saying, there's the 3 common types of zones that DVPs are received for. The RS zones, low density residential, the ag, and the small holdings account for 87% of all DVPs. And as I was just saying, the 4 most common types are the parcel line setbacks, so that's all types, front, rear, and side. For principal dwellings, 33%, for accessory dwellings at 30%, and then followed by building height and retaining walls, and that's 77.4% of all DVPs the board considers. Now, this next series of slides is dealing with how these have been determined by the board. So you can see here, and I hope this makes sense, but about 78.2% of DVPs since 2013 have been placed on consent, so over 3/4. Of those placed on consent, over 90% are being decided on the consent agenda, i.e. they aren't being removed, although 8.2% are removed. And the remaining 21.8% of DVPs are placed on the regular board agenda. And again, as I was saying earlier, that's generally because of a negative recommendation or because negative representations have been received. So of that total, 96.7% of all DVPs the board sees are being approved. In those instances, staff have generally supported about 89.7% of DVPs. And there has only been one instance where staff supported a DVP, but the board ended up denying it. So with the two lines here, you can see the darker lines are the board's consideration versus the administrative recommendations. In terms of representations that we receive on DVPs, and again, this is one I'm a little less certain about, but I'm fairly confident in the numbers, but it's hard to go back on previous board agendas to tally representations. But of the 275 applications, about 16.3% received representations. It was interesting to see the split that is basically 50-50. But reflecting on why that might be, it may not be that surprising, given that we know sometimes applicants will canvass neighbors for support for their variance to potentially help it be approved. So just interesting to see that it was 50-50. And so this last slide too is just situations where we have received negative representations. And what this is showing is that the board has approved 86.7% of DVPs where representations have been received opposing the particular representation, or sorry, particular variance is being sought. So summary observations on those last set of slides. So from our perspective at a staff level, we see that we are generally in agreement with the board in terms of recommendations on almost 90% of variance applications received. There was that one instance where we supported a DVP that the board ultimately refused. It's interesting that 3/4 are being decided on the consent agenda, which to us, especially in this context of the legislative changes in relation to minors, suggests that most of the variances that the board are seeing might fit into that category. And that also, well, overall, the majority of variances are being approved by the board, even when there are opposing representations submitted by neighbors. So based on all of that history and understanding and past practices with the consent agenda, we've tried to draft proposed guidelines to kind of reflect current practices. And again, I won't spend too much time on these. I think they're pretty straightforward and are generally criteria that we use at a staff level anyway when we're assessing variance applications and trying to come up with recommendations to the board. We have proposed guidelines here. I guess what I will say is that, and I've got some slides that speak to alternative ways of looking at what is minor versus not minor, but from our perspective, we feel that this approach provides flexibility for staff to consider the unique aspects of a particular property or the type of structure that's being proposed and how that relates to an existing neighborhood. And basically allows us to use our experience and professional understanding of these situations to make a determination, as opposed to having a rigid, inflexible standard applied to what constitutes minor versus major. I've got some examples here. So, having come up with those criteria that I just proposed on those previous two slides, we were curious to see how that would have played out with some recent applications that we received. So we went back and looked at all of our 2022 DVPs and just did like some test assessments on them to see if we would consider them major versus minor, and then would we or would we not issue the permit. So this was one that was up in the Falder area, seeking to formalize an existing carport. We ran through the criteria that we came up with, and in this particular case, it was deemed to be minor. And then on the question of whether staff should issue the DVP using the guidelines that we prepared, we came to the conclusion that we would potentially have gone forward with issuing that DVP. And then the flip side of the argument here is the other one where we may not have. So this is a recent one that the board may recall of at Workman Place in Naramata. It was a fairly substantial variance request to put a deck off the back of a house towards the KVR. So using that same criteria again, we came to a different conclusion on this one because it was seen to be major. It was a substantial reduction to the variance request, or sorry, to the variance standard, setback standard. It was contrary to the direction the board had previously given us to build into the bylaw in relation to development near the KVR trail. and also no other structures in the area were that close to the trail. So it failed on all 3 counts. And on that basis, staff would not consider it under minor delegation, and it would be put forward for the board's consideration. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Act doesn't actually require delegated DVPs to be notified. However, with the guidelines that we've drafted for the board's consideration, we feel that there is still merit in going out and seeking input from potentially affected property owners and residents in the area. So even though it's not required, we are proposing that for delegated permits, they continue to be notified. We're proposing that the radius be 30 meters around the property because, from our experience over the last few years, it seems to us that most of the representations we receive on applications are from either a property owner is sharing a parcel line with a property under application, or people immediately across the street. And we would also be posting the application materials, continue to post the application materials for delegated DVPs on the website for property owners to review. We're further proposing, and again, this gets back to the reconsideration consideration, which I'll touch on in a minute, but that submissions for delegated DVPs be either submitted electronically or at the RDOS office. We do have concerns with proposed timelines and making sure that we can deal with delegated DVPs in a timely process, that submissions submitted through Canada Post by mailing might come in later, and we don't want to be waiting for Canada Post. So our preference would be either electronically or submit them in person at the RDOS office. Reconsideration, as I mentioned, the Act requires property owners to have that option. Our procedures bylaw sets out a 30-day window, but again, just to ensure that delegated DVPs can be processed in a timely fashion, we're proposing that rather than that be an open-ended 30-day where staff are waiting, unsure of whether a property owner may or may not ask for reconsideration, that if there's a situation where staff have recommended against or denied a delegated DVP, or it is the subject of a negative representation, that it automatically be reconsidered by the board, so we can get it to the board in a timely fashion, and we're not waiting for a possible reconsideration request or not. So that's something else we're proposing. So that's kind of an outline of what staff have come up with. For the board's benefit, there are other ways of approaching the minor variance option. So, we tried to brainstorm on what those could be, and the options we came up with could be done by zoning category, it could be done by zoning regulation, it could be done by a percentage of the regulation, or some other combination of these options, which we've outlined here. So how that might look, and these are some of the stats I presented earlier. So if the board was of an opinion to do it by zone, and again, this is completely arbitrary, but it could be that given the majority of applications are for low density agriculture and small holdings, the board could determine that it still wanted to see all variance applications from those zones, but delegate to staff dealing with variances from every other zone. Again, from our perspective, it's not ideal. There is a concern that variance requests in those top 3 zones could be minor, and equally variance requests in some of the other zones could be major and may not be suitable. So it's not a perfect way to deal with it. And similarly with the regulation, and again, this is just a completely arbitrary line, but everything above the red dashed line there, the board could say they consider those to be major and they want to continue to see them, but everything other than setbacks, retaining walls and building height could be delegated to staff. But like for the same concerns I outlined in relation to zones, it seems rather arbitrary and rigid, and doesn't take into consideration site considerations, neighborhood character, et cetera. So potentially an inflexible way to deal with it. The third one is the percentage option. And so what I've seen elsewhere is that generally it's a 25% rule. So if the variance request is 25% of the regulation, it could be deemed to be minor. Anything above 25% is major. So the example I have here is for a house. If the building height is 10 meters and somebody wanted to go to 12.5 meters, the board could determine that to be minor and let staff deal with it. Or if it's 12.6 meters and above, the board looks at it. Again, it's a rigid approach to it. It doesn't necessarily take into consideration site characteristics. And I've got an example here from some retaining walls that the board has seen recently. And so the one on the left under a percentage rule could be considered by staff because it is minor by that standard, going from 1.2 meters to 1.4 meters. The other one, however, because it's 1.2 to 2.8, would not be able to be delegated. And of course, looking at these site plans is, from our perspective, is one somehow less impactful than the other. We don't see quite how that could be, but that's how our percentage approach would work. So in summary, and I'll wrap up quickly here, delegated DBPs we consider to be a positive innovation with hopefully the potential, knock on wood, to reduce application processing times, as well as the volume of applications the board must consider. We feel that the guidelines and assessment criteria that we proposed will help to ensure consistency in staff's approach to assessing applications and making determinations whether to issue if we are granted delegation. But it also at the same time creates an effective mechanism for continued board oversight of any delegated decisions the staff make. And then I just want to highlight again that, from that past experience with the consent agenda going forward and those 275 variance permits that we've dealt with, it seems that staff and the board are generally in agreement on the majority of variances that come before the regional district. And again, 3/4 of these are already being decided on the consent agenda, which we would argue as minor applications. And so delegation might help to reduce some of those items that the board has to see. And I believe that's it. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions that the directors might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garish. One point for clarification before I open it for questions. 2.2.3, development staff will notify relevant area director of an application. Is that notify or look for consent from the area director? There's kind of a difference there.
It would be a continuation of our current practice, which is basically when we receive a variance application for your electoral area, we will let you know that it's come in, basically what they're seeking, and if we're able, we'll try to give you an indication of when we're thinking or looking at scheduling it for board consideration. So no decision, it's just a courtesy notification to let you know it's in.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Newell, I see your hand up.
I just did want to add, Mr. Chair, British Columbia is a bit late in the game on this. Most other jurisdictions already do provide for delegation of minor variances. So that's one thing. The other is applicants also have the opportunity to submit to the Board of Variance. And so there is already some other opportunities to circumvent going to through the legislative process. But of course, those are mostly the hardship ones, the more significant variances that would, if applied to us, would go before the board anyway. So just thought I'd add that in just for further information, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Director Roberts.
Thank you. I've had a great opportunity to go through this plus to discuss with staff, and I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Thank you, sir. Do I see a seconder? Director Obrick, are you seconding?
I won't second, but I have a question when you have opportunity, Chair.
Very good, sir. Your question, sir?
Oh, comment and question.
So, sorry, Mr. Chair, you should get the seconder first.
Okay, seconder, Director Kozakovich. Okay, your question, Director Obrick.
Right, and I have a comment and a question. Comment first. Impressive presentation, much appreciated. Mr. Garish speaks fast. I listened fast. I loved it. I would like a copy of the PowerPoint. I support more efficiency. I like the idea of getting costs down, time
We lost
down,
your audio.
Can you hear me now?
You're back on again, sir. Yeah.
This is like cell service and internet service at my house. I live in the rural area, in case you're wondering. The urban directors would not know what I'm talking about. So moving on, I said very impressive presentation. Thank you very much. I'd love a copy of the PowerPoint. I support more efficiency. That means getting costs down, getting the time spent down, getting service to the taxpayer improved. I think this is the right direction. I think we need balance. Those rigid comments by Mr. Garish, I have concern on the rigidity. We need balance, which means you need an opportunity to bring matters to the board when you have circumstances that are unique. And I think that balance can be easily found. And indeed, we benefit with all that improvement and of course, respect the board authority and respect the taxpayer and the private property owner's interest. My question is, with respect to the environmentally sensitive development permit bylaw that we've discussed previously, does this new direction of delegated variance type authority, can it apply in the context of the environmentally sensitive development permit area? My experience in my area is that the community is largely in support of protecting the environment, and I think we could really improve our success on that bylaw by having delegation similarly to staff when we're dealing with a 10-acre holding and somebody wants to put a garage and a quarter of that garage is in the pink zone, and we're costing them a 2-year and thousands of dollars cost for something that really is minor. I could give many examples, but I think part of the fix in the environmentally sensitive development permit area would be this kind of delegation to competent staff who I think can do the job well, with that balance of on appropriate case going back to the board for assist, and we can get costs down, efficiencies up, and a balancing of interest. So my question is, does this in any way have application to that environmentally sensitive permit area bylaw? And if not, could we adopt some of these principles in any event in that bylaw? So 2 parts to the question.
Thank you very much, Director Oberk. Mr. Garish, do you have an answer there?
Well, possibly. So the act does already give us delegation authority for development permits, and the board has previously, through the CAO delegation bylaw, given us that authority to issue DPs. The challenge with the ESDPs is that we don't have a professional biologist on staff. And because the way the guidelines are written for ESDPs, it requires assessment by a qualified environmental professional, which is defined as being a registered professional biologist. This is somewhat different because it's well within, if you want to say, the wheelhouse of land use planners. I mean, this is kind of what we go to school for with the DVPs, assessing built form, urban form, streetscape characteristics. So I feel we're qualified and experienced to deal with delegated DVPs for structures. Yeah, ESDPs presents a challenge in that we have historically relied on the professional reliance model to give us access to that expertise to make recommendations on which we issue our delegated development permits.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions? Director Holmes, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a question regarding transparency. I'm just always cautious when the board isn't in the know of things that they used to be in the know about, and so would there be like a quarterly reporting out to the board of the variances that were issued or anything like that?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Garish?
Yes, we have thought about that internally, which is one of the reasons why we're proposing to continue to post the delegated DVPs on the website. So that the public can see what staff are assessing and potentially issuing permits for under delegation. And I mean, it would certainly be easy enough for us as part of our quarterly reports to the board to include some basic information on the delegated DVPs we dealt with in the previous quarter.
Thank you, sir.
I follow up, if I may?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think that would be useful because not everybody necessarily goes to the website, so just because you post on the website doesn't necessarily make it transparent, I don't think. And the other question I had is, was any consideration given on increasing the notification parameter from 30 meters? You know, what DPs usually just affect the immediate neighborhood. I mean, those are the people who are usually most concerned. And 30 meters in most areas is basically just the next door neighbors. In Summerland, we increased it for all our notifications, I think, to 50 meters.
I think it's 60.
60, we increased ours to 60 meters just so to get a bit more neighbors notified there. And I'm just wondering if any consideration along those lines was made. Thanks.
Mr. Garish, sir?
Well, our consideration in coming to the 30 meters, and it was just a reflection of what we were seeing when we were going back and tallying the representations that had been received on previous DVPs, was it seemed to us that the majority of the majority of people who were submitting tended to be, immediately adjacent to the property under application or across the street. So we took the approach that 30 meters would capture, obviously, people with a shared parcel line. And given the average road dedication is around 20 meters, if we did 30, that would capture people across the street. But we're certainly open to other suggestions that the board may want to see on this.
Thank you, sir. Director Olbrich?
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, just further to Director Holmes' comment, a common call I've had since being elected is people who, on all different kinds of matter, express concern about notice. Sometimes it's the property owner themselves didn't get notice. Other times it's neighbors who wonder why they didn't get notice. And I really believe, further to transparency and notice, there's room here to provide better service to community. People just want to know what's going on, and they want a right to be heard. If the process is fair, if their concern is listened to, my experience is people respect decisions. What they don't respect is when they're not allowed to participate because of a technical, you got the notice because it was posted somewhere or in a publication. I could give numerous examples, not only since I've been elected, but through legal process as well. And it's a pet peeve of mine. I don't think it's wrong. I think in an organization like ours, it's actually a benefit we have because we're dealing with smaller communities, and the notice, things have changed such that I think that concern is something we should consider when we're making things better. I think that's a little thing that people would really appreciate, and it would help everybody, staff, board, community, all. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Olbrich. Good comment. Mr. Garish, do you have any? Thank you. Director Robinson?
Sorry. Yeah, just for your information, the city of Penticton just increased ours substantially to notify more and more neighbors, because we were finding the same thing as other people have just mentioned, that the neighborhood was saying that they just weren't aware of it, and they very much appreciated to be able to weigh in on the subject. So just so you know, that's the direction Penticton went in.
Thank you very much. Director Roberts, please. You're muted, sir.
There you go. All the important stuff was left blank. I appreciate the notification process, and one of the things is, we do have it, but we, as was stated earlier on the presentation by Mr. Garish, looks like they're going to look at some different and further options, because historically through legislation, things went to newspapers, but we went over and above just from the newspapers, social media, Facebook, our websites, and as well as our notification system, which again, I think we need to do more as an organization, more as individuals, whoever we can reach out to get them to be connected to our notification system, because, for instance, I'm hit with everything that's going on in every one of the electoral areas, whether or not it's the DVP or other issues. So, we do a lot, but maybe we got to do more in regards to encouraging people that this is the process that you need to do. If you're a landowner in the area, you should be connected to Voyant. And that being said, there's been a few people that have stated that they're interested in a little bit of a wider grouping, like up to 60 meters. Is that something that somebody, or are we interested in amending the motion to go to a larger sphere? So like moving it out to 60, because it seems like that is of the greater concern.
Thank you, Director Roberts. Mr. Garish, would we need to make that a motion or a staff directive?
I'm not sure. I mean, I can certainly take a note on what the board's preference is. The purpose of the meeting today is for discussion on this. I'd still have to bring it back for formal readings. So if I might defer to the CAO on what the best way to give direction to staff on this is.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Knoll, please.
Yeah, we'll just take it as information for right now, Mr. Chair. And when we do bring the bylaws forward, if the board does want to make an amendment, they can do it formally then.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions? I see none on my board. Are there any in the boardroom? I see none. We have a question on the, or we have a motion on the board, on the floor. All in favor? Any opposed? I see none. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to our second one. Scheduling of public information meetings for temporary use permit application. CAO Knoll, would you care to explain?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So we have an extraordinary requirement for staff to attend evening meetings, and that affects our quality, our work-life quality. That is evidence in itself in how long our staff stay with us. So we wanted to have a look at this, certainly as part of our staff retention program, as to what we can do in order to make this more palatable. And we have a couple of reports actually coming today that deal with that. But certainly from the planning perspective, with the advisory planning commissions and the public information meetings and the public hearings and the OCP groups, we're working them night and day. So Mr. Garish has put together really a short report that summarizes just what we'd like to start considering for this. I would remind the chair that we do have only 5 minutes left in committee. We do have 3 delegations under corporate services. But we could get Mr. Garish to put this on the floor, and there's no urgency on it. If we don't get through, we could bring this back at the next meeting. But we'd like to introduce it to committee in order to start them thinking.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Garish, please.
Great, thank you. I'll try to talk faster. Okay, TUPs and public information meetings. So again, just some statutory requirements. There is actually no requirement for a public hearing, public information meeting, or the type of similar early and ongoing consultation that we're required to do for rezonings in relation to a TUP. At present, the development procedures bylaw states that applicants are required to host a public information session prior to board consideration of their application. It says development services staff may assist with the scheduling and notification of this meeting in accordance with the bylaw. Our experience, however, has been that generally applicants aren't scheduling these PIMs themselves. They're relying on staff. I think the intent was when we drafted the bylaw all those years ago that the applicants would do this, but as the board's aware, we get a lot of do-it-yourselfers, and this is their first exposure to the land use planning application process, and their ability to schedule on their own one of these types of public information meetings can be daunting. So staff have generally taken that on. We've tried to reduce the onus on staff by piggybacking these with APC meetings. So as the directors are aware, we'll generally try to schedule the PIM half an hour before the APC meeting on the same night to try to reduce our night meetings. We have been doing all the PIMs electronically since COVID, and as the board or some of the directors may be aware, attendance at the PIMs for TUP applications has not been great. Obviously, there are exceptions to this, and it generally is in relation to contentious vacation rental proposals. But what we're proposing is some changes be made. It's kind of similar in building on what the board considered last year when they removed the requirement for mandatory PIM for renewal of a vacation rental. We would ideally like to go further with that and kind of actually take a step back to the way the bylaw was originally written, which was that the determination for a PIM was at the board's discretion based on considerations such as the scale of the proposal or the public interest. Now, if the board will indulge me, I just want to take I'm just going to diverge for a second here and just explain kind of, further than what the CIO was saying, some of the motivating factors. So this is a slide I presented last meeting. And it just speaks to some of the challenges that we're having within the department, particularly in relation to the amount of overtime that staff are doing. And as I hinted at last meeting, we've also had a resignation recently within the department, so we're short-staffed again. And workloads and night meetings were certainly, I believe, a consideration in that resignation. So we're trying to bring this, or trying to address this in some way. We are trying to focus on the major projects that the board has assigned to us. And so I know in the report I said that there was a number of measures that we were taking in relation to night meetings. The amendment bylaw before you today is just one of them. I wanted to highlight for the board too that we are going to implement starting June 1st a standardized schedule for PIMs. So applicants will continue to be able to do their own public information meetings, but if they want to have staff assist with it, we're going to have one day a month in which we'll schedule these PIMs. And so this is the schedule we've come up with. For public hearings, again, I know in the past we've made recommendations either at a board table or delegate out to a director in the community. I think going forward, the default administrative recommendation will always be to hold the hearings prior to a board meeting. Obviously, the board still has the discretion to delegate to a director and have a night meeting, but I think from staff's perspective, we'll always be looking at the board. And the other one I wanted to highlight for the board is I think starting June 1st, we'll be implementing changes in relation to the APC meetings. So staff will no longer be able to attend APC meetings, either in person or electronically. So just some considerations for the board going forward. At a staff level, we are expecting this to mean that APCs will likely have to be happening in person for June, July, August, and going forward. Other considerations as well is that staff will no longer be available to take minutes for the APCs. Will also no longer be available to open and close the facilities for the APC meetings. And because we won't be at the meetings in person, the APCs still have the opportunity to reach out to staff before their meetings to answer any queries they have. So jumping back into the amendment bylaw that's before you in relation to the PIMs for TUP applications, we are recommending that the mandatory requirement be removed and that the board determine when a public information meeting is required based on, again, the scale or public feedback. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have if there's time.
Given the time constraint, I think maybe we should be holding this over to the next meeting. I don't think this needs a motion. Well, at this point, Mr. Knoll, does this need a motion?
No, we'll just consider it put up for information, Mr. Chair, and we'll bring it back on the next agenda.
Thank you very much. I think at this point we should look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you. I motion Director Bauer and seconded Director Roberts. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Canola. We will move directly into Corporate Services Committee, and we have three.
To you in December. In the discussion after the board, they asked for more investigation. Cornerstone had recommended a renovation of 101 Martin Street by adding a second story to the existing building. They had considered a new build option in Penticton and rejected that option for lack of suitable sites. Well, we're here today to tell you that we would like to share with you some additional information that supports the new build option in Okanagan Falls. This slide is directly from the Cornerstone final report. And as you're fully aware of, your current facilities are a patchwork of locations and ownerships that are not meeting the current needs and definitely won't meet the district's long-term growth. And as you're fully aware, the current space does not accommodate new expectations for ventilation, privacy, and IT issues. Cornerstone also estimated that the RDOS is experiencing significant growth in the next 20 years. You need a solution that will resolve these issues. Currently, you're doing 2022 work in a 1980s building. What's here now is not working as well as anyone wants. Office space and its feasibility have been an issue that the RDOS has been wrestling with for a while now. This is another excerpt from the Cornerstone final report. In their view, a new build option had many merits and favorable cost considerations, but they could not overcome the risks that a suitable location could be found in Penticton. And the time to sort out those issues would be quite extensive. We believe that Okanagan Falls may provide the solution to these risks. Had the consultants been aware of what Okanagan Falls has to offer, the new build option would have remained a viable option. So we're going to quickly run through why a new building in OK Falls makes sense for OK Falls, for the city of Penticton, and most importantly for the RDOS. First and foremost, there are several high-quality locations immediately available for purchase, for lease, or on a build-lease basis. Secondly, the RDOS would have a real presence in the South Okanagan and act as a catalyst for growth, which is one of your strategic goals. The issue of office space has been coming to this board for many years, and we're presenting a solution for a long term. We really feel that the RDOS office would be an anchor and a draw for the entire South Okanagan and give the RDOS the opportunity to show incredible leadership in creating a state-of-the-art new building that is environmentally sustainable and good for the whole region. Benefits to the city of Penticton. Relocating the office to OK Falls might at first glance seem to be a loss for Penticton, but if the RDOS sold Martin Street property and it was rezoned residential, it could be very positive. Rather than having 70 people working there just during the day, there could be a few hundred people living there, supporting the local businesses and increasing the tax revenue for the city. Relocating new buildings to Okanagan Falls gives the RDOS a huge financial benefit. In addition to the funds created from the sale of Martin Street, land costs are significantly lower in OK Falls. More importantly, a new build is much lower financial risk than a renovation because the costs are more accurately measured. Cornerstone identified these specific risks that always seem to occur with a renovation. It improves our customer service. Short-term benefits for the public would be less service disruption during construction and relocation, less juggling and relocation of public access during the renovation of adding a second story. Imagine moving just once into a purpose-built building rather than managing services through a construction site. Long-term, most of the services the RDOS provide are to the residents of the rural areas. Penticton, Summerland, Suyas, Oliver, and Princeton already provide these services directly. In fact, 83% of the region's urban population is closer to OK Falls than to downtown Penticton. It's actually faster to get to OK Falls than from the south end of Penticton than it is to the RDOS office. And this chart is just another way of looking at how easily getting to Okanagan Falls will be for most of the RDOS taxpayers. Most areas are closer proximity to OK Falls. There are a number of sustainable reasons for the RDOS to relocate its office to a new building in Okanagan Falls. This solution is beneficial environmentally, economically, and socially. Overall, building sustainability is a strategic goal for the RDOS, and coming to OK Falls will provide that in a regional growth for transportation and housing. Cornerstone Consulting identified that office design significantly affects staff retention. We have shown here some of the ways in which the new state-of-the-art building could make working easier, more productive, and healthier for staff. And there won't be parking hassles for staff or the public. Benefits for the staff of a purpose-built design and workflow. No dodging through a renovation site. We put this slide back up to show the issues that Cornerstone highlighted as part of the building a new facility. The risk was finding and acquiring a site, possible demolition, and then planning design, and then construction. We think Okanagan Falls is the solution to finding and acquiring a site with no demolition issues. It reduced disruption, costs, and risks, and selling Martin Street offsets many of the costs. Planning, design, and construction are probably going to be more straightforward for a new build than for a major renovation of adding a second floor. There are currently 4 available sites in Okanagan Falls that are large enough to meet the district's needs. Very briefly, I'll give you a rundown of these sites that we know are currently available. You're probably all familiar with the site beside our former IGA grocery store, which I might add opened for new business this morning as Betchler's Grocery Store. We have a grocery store in OK Falls. This parcel is 3 acres and it's available. We also have Avery Business Park, which is on the former Weyerhaeuser site. It has a newly formed subdivision underway and it has its first building under construction. We also have right on Highway 97 at 8th Avenue, a property with high visibility that is currently listed. And the last property we've identified, and there may be others, is adjacent to the Legion and is just across from Tickleberries. And who can't have more ice cream in their life? Are there reasons that you wouldn't want to have the district office in OK Falls? Staff may have some concerns over a longer commute and fewer food choices in shops nearby. We actually don't know what the changes in commuting time would be. For some staff, it might be shorter, and for others, it might be a bit longer. However, in today's standards, for commuting 20 minutes isn't considered onerous. And the other benefits would include better remote working access from a new building. That would be substantial. With respect to food access, gym facilities, shopping, those kinds of things, this goes back to what we said earlier. The RDOS would be considered a draw for these new businesses, which in turn builds our RDOS community. So back to the beginning. In December, you were presented with 3 options and the consultants recommended the first, the renovation. In our brief presentation, we hope that we've given you reason to consider another option, a new RDOS building in Okanagan Falls. Really, it's time. For over 25 years, the regional district has operated in the same space. When it started, the needs of the community were really different. Now it's time. An appropriate building is really coming of age for the regional district, reflecting the maturation of the organization, the South Okanagan, and a need for change. Many of the issues identified by the consultants that needed solving, like growth, modernization, cost effectiveness, timeliness, and strategic fit, are resolved with a new build. It's time to think outside the city and to really consider a location that's central to the region and fits the modern needs of the RDOS. It makes financial sense for both the RDOS and Penticton taxpayers. It benefits the people it serves and lessens the transition disruption. Relocating the office in OK Falls fulfills a number of your strategic goals. It creates a wonderful space for staff and allows the RDOS to demonstrate leadership for staff, for the public, and for the environment. Our ask is that you add Okanagan Falls to the potential sites for a new build. Thank you for your opportunity for me being here today.
Good presentation and timely. As you are likely aware, the option to discuss this is on the main board agenda later today, so we will have a good discussion about this in that, I'm sure. But I would ask, is there any questions for the delegation at this time? We keep it to the questions. Director Obrick, please.
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chair, when opportunity arises, so I'll wait until you recognize me for that purpose.
Sure. Director Bush, I see a hand from you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to ask a question. I know Director Obrick's always complaining about his internet, and I'm just wondering, do they have fiber optics in Okanagan?
I can speak to that. We have some fiber optic in some communities. We have 2,098 titles. 67% of those have connectivity. A very small percentage of those have fiber optics. 2020, we had staff in our community development office, Robin, to be specific, put in application on a grant, which we did not succeed on, but Carameos and Princeton did succeed on. I have spoken personally with Jeff Cruikshank from TELUS. There's a lot of work that's been done on this, but the short answer is we need help. We're just one of thousands of rural communities in Canada that need help. We're just one.
Okay. So it's there in places. Go ahead, Matt.
If I could, I believe that several of the locations mentioned do have access to fiber optics. And I think we also need to consider that there's substantial growth occurring in the community at present. We have over 70 homes going in, which may not be a lot in Penticton, but in a small town this size, that's, you know, a significant improvement. Those 70 homes will probably be built out over the next year or two. And as well, we have additional jobs and coming through the business park. With the advent of both jobs and new homes, we anticipate that connectivity as it stands now will be improved upon significantly in the next year or two.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any other questions for the delegation?
If I could, to the chair.
Go ahead.
We would certainly welcome the opportunity. We have a report, and if there were opportunity to share with the directors, we think if you could, you know, read the report and follow through our rationale, I think you'd come away quite well informed of the opportunity that's here.
Okay, well, we appreciate that. If I could ask you to send that report to Christy Mulden at the RDOS, and I'm sure she can distribute it out to us fairly quickly. I'm not seeing any hands, so I appreciate the time and effort goes into preparing for that, and thank you for giving us the presentation today.
Thank you all.
We will move on to the next delegation, which comes to us from the Coston Elementary School. So I will go to the CAO on this one.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Am I not allowed to make a motion?
Yes, I'll get to that right at the end of the meeting here, Ron, is the intent.
I did not understand. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that assistance.
We've got the delegations in a lineup, so we will get to that. CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So this is Local Government Awareness Week, and our Legislative Services Department has been working with Coston Elementary to include them specifically into our program. So I'd like to ask that Ms. Andrea Rendell, one of our communications officers, present to committee, and then I understand we have delegations from Coston. So we should turn it over to Ms. Rendell, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Rendell.
During the third week of May. And this year, as mentioned, the RDOS has partnered with Coston Primary grades 3 and 4 students to explore what regional and local government means for them. As a recap, on Monday and Tuesday earlier this week, students participated in a scavenger hunt style activity that was along the new Coston Trail, and they visited 10 stations, all with different themes about government programs and services. Students answered questions to earn letters and unscramble the word government. And afterwards, they went to Cobo Park, where activities and games were set up, courtesy of RDOS Rec Patch Trailer and volunteer support. And yesterday, students were visited by Electoral Area B Director Bush and Municipal Director Bauer, where they talked about their roles and services provided by the RDOS. And today we have the students here along with their teacher, Ms. Jensen, and they are here to meet the board and ask some more questions. So welcome, Ms. Jensen. Thank you.
Yes, hi, thank you. Good morning. We have come up with 8 questions that some of my students are going to ask. All right, Abby, you want to come up here and look into camera? Yes, scooch down. Say hi, I'm Evie.
Hi, I'm Evie.
Any question?
What is it like being a director?
You don't want, that's a good question. Is there anybody willing to answer that one? Someone want to give it a go? Director Olbrich?
Yes, and thank you, Melissa. I was going to make a joke that it's something you wish on somebody you don't like, because it's can be very difficult and unpleasant at times. But I can tell you what it's like. It's an amazing opportunity to help make your community better. You get to listen to people who have concerns, who care. You get to speak to those concerns at a table which has the authority, the board table. We have the authority to make the laws better, the bylaws. We can amend them, we can create them, we can make them better. And we get to listen to people who have, they want to do something like add on to their home a deck or a bedroom or something. And sometimes there's a variance required. So we have the authority to listen and balance the different concerns and provide what's called a quasi-judicial function. That means we're like judges. We get to listen to all the people who have concerns, and then we do our best to give a decision to help that issue, that community. And so if you like to help people, it is wonderful. It is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And if you want to make things better, one of the things you learn is it's harder to do than you would hope for. It can be difficult to get things better. There's all kinds of resistance, all kinds of fear and concern. And so that's what it's like to be a director. Thank you, Melissa. I hope that helps you a bit.
That's a good answer. Did we have another question? Go ahead.
Say hi.
Hi, I'm Manaya. How hard is it to be a director?
Hi, Manaya. How hard is it to be a director? Go ahead. Go to Director Coyne for that one.
Hi there. Some days it can be really hard because some days you have to make decisions that you don't like to make. Some days you have to vote in a way that you wouldn't personally want to vote, but it's for everybody's betterment, not just your own. So sometimes you have to take out your own self and think about everybody else. So that can be difficult at times. But most of the time it's pretty satisfying because like Director Oberich said, we get to implement change and we get to do things that happen instantly. And we affect your lives every single day and you don't even know it. So we've got it's a really good job and I love it.
Thank you, Director Coyne. Is there another individual who has a question?
Hi, I'm Tobias, and my question today is how big of a responsibility is it to be a director?
Okay, thank you, Tobias. Another good question. Somebody want to take a stab at answering that one? Director Portoff, please, go ahead.
Hi, Tobias, and all the other students that are there. I am a mayor of the town of Vesuvius, and I seem to think that I'm on a 24/7 schedule, which means that I can expect questions, I can expect people to phone me or email me or talk to me in the grocery store just about any time in any day. So I as well as Mayor Coyne, I absolutely enjoy this job. I'm really happy that I took this on. I was a teacher before this, and so lots of the students that I taught live in my town, which helps me to get to know them. And also I'm part of the regional district, so I come up to meetings here in Penticton and share ideas and comments with all of the other directors from the whole area. So it's a great job. but it does take a lot of time.
Thank you. Next question.
I'm Griffin. How hard is it to keep your areas safe?
To keep our areas safe?
Yeah,
Oh,
like you answer that one.
that is a tough question. I don't know as a director. I'll let someone else answer that. Director Monteith, go ahead.
The students, when we represent our area, we quite often are working with our local volunteer fire departments, which provide a very vital role in our communities. They are volunteers in our communities. So there are moms and dads that volunteer to learn the skills to protect our communities, as well as we have the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which do patrol our areas and support us in need. But we don't have them all the time in our communities. So quite often we are helping residents to identify areas where they can make their homes safer. So making sure that they work together as a community, share information, and do the best they can to protect everyone.
Yeah, it is a challenge. Go ahead, Director Point.
So I'll add to that because so there's a difference between a municipality and a regional district. Municipalities have more responsibility than a regional director would. The regional director works in a team with the whole regional district, whereas a municipality, they kind of stand alone in some respect inside a regional district. So Princeton, like you guys had flooding in November, and we're responsible for dealing with that. Where in a regional district, it's more on the province than it is on the municipality to deal with the dikes and that flooding. So it can be difficult at times because there's different levels of government, and that different levels of government can make it complicated.
Yeah. One more person, Director Trainer, go ahead.
Hi everyone. So last summer, you'll probably remember that we had a lot of forest fires. And so that's one of the things that the regional districts help manage. And so during a wildfire, one of the ways that we keep our communities and neighborhoods safe is that we run an emergency operations center here in Penticton. And that has lots of staff in it and people from the province. And the staff at the RDOS work with the local firefighters to help keep your neighborhood safe and to help put out the fires and manage the fires, and as well communicate with all of you guys about what's going on. When the fire season isn't on, so right now, the RDOS staff and as well as the directors and all the firemen and firewomen out there, they all do planning sessions so that when we do have a fire, that we all know what to do and we work together. So that's one of the ways that we try to keep you all safe, is we try to anticipate what will happen, and we do a lot of planning to keep you guys safe.
Thank you. Good answers, and it can be a challenge for sure. Is there another question? Please go ahead.
Hi, my name's Reese. How many people work for the RDOS?
How many people work for the RDOS? Maybe I should have the CAO answer that one. I'll go to CAO Newell.
Well, thanks for inviting me in, Mr. Chair. So we have a number of different categories of employees. So we have management employees, and we have other exempt employees out of the union that we consider in a separate group. So we have about 20 of those. The rest of our employees are unionized with the BC Union of Government Employees, and we have about 80 of them. And then by far the largest cohort is our volunteers. So with our fire departments, we probably have over our 8 fire departments about 150 that we consider volunteers that work on behalf of the citizens of the regional district. So overall about 100 employees, and then our large crew of volunteers that work with us as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, CAO. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Kaylee, and do you all have to agree to build something?
Well, that's a good question. Thanks for that, Kaylee. We don't all have to agree. Generally, the decisions are the majority rule. There are certain cases where it's what they call a weighted vote, but that's more to do with financial and money interests. So the majority of the time, it's just the majority rule. So 50% plus 1 is generally the answer to that. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Dylan, and why did you want to become a director?
Another good question. Or a director. Why does anybody want to become a director? Do we have Director Monteith?
To be a director, you are truly a community champion and you're representing your community. So it is an honor and a privilege, and it's something that I believe we all do because we want to do what's best for our community. So to be able to share community vision and bring that forward and work together as a team is probably the most rewarding part.
Thank you for that. Director Roberts, did you want to add to that?
Sure, thank you. Like Director McCordoff, I used to work with education as well, and a lot of the work that I've had through my life was all about community, and that's what my interest. I was really encouraged to get involved, to be an advocate, to support the issues in an area that, you know, rurally, like Director Coyne had stated, we don't have the same individual responsibilities like they do in a municipality, but here we get the opportunity to be an advocate for our area at the board and provide an insight at what life is like in our particular areas, and then share our concerns as well as our successes so that we can support each other moving forward. And I find it a real honor. Thank you for that question.
Sure. Director Olbrich, you want to add to that?
Yes, I did, and thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Like Director Roberts, I have a lot of experience. My wife and I had 4 children. We made sure our children, we gave them the best we could. They went to swimming, gymnastics, soccer, hockey, acting, music, and we did a lot of volunteering with our children with all those programs, and I got involved in community associations and other volunteerism, baseball, and I went to university and I studied law, and I've practiced law for over 35 years now. And in all that time, I learned a lot about people's frustrations and problems and their wants to how to have a better life. And so when I decided to run, I had a lot of experience, and I thought that I could help. And I wanted to help. I wanted to help my community. What Director Monteith said is so true, I think, of all of us. We all feel that way about our communities. We all want to help. And I can't speak for everybody, but I can say that that was why I decided to stand for office. Is I really thought that I could be of value and be of help to the board, to the community, and to help make things better. Thank you.
That's a good answer, and that's for next question, if there is another one.
Hi, I'm Jack, and what type of bylaws are there?
What type of bylaws are there? Oh gosh, there's lots of different bylaws out there. I'll attempt to answer that. There's animal control bylaws, there's bylaws in regards to noise, garbage, when you can put it out to get picked up. There's all kinds of rules out there. It almost is to the point where there's a bylaw for almost everything. Yeah. Go ahead, Director Obrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to add, it's a great question, and I'm going to take a moment to teach a little bit to a class of students who clearly are interested. Your questions are amazing. Your teacher is amazing for getting this before us. Thank you so much. In Canada, we have 3 levels of government. The federal government, the Parliament in Ottawa, They have powers under Section 91 of our British North America Act 1867, and they make laws that pertain to things like transportation, communications, the military. They have a whole area that they make laws. The province is under Section 92, and they make laws for matters of local concern, things like education, healthcare, and they have the power over local issues, and they delegate that power by creating what we call local government. That's the third level of government, and that's who we are. And we make bylaws, and these bylaws are related to land use and matters in the community. So we cannot make a law that pertains to crime, for example. That is the power of the federal government. So there's a lot of things we can't make laws on, even though sometimes we would like to. And but what we do is we do bylaws that pertain primarily to land use and matters of local concern. So things like a noise bylaw would be another example. Thank you.
Yes. Good answer. Is there another question? Or I'll go to Director Knoll first. He wanted to add to that?
Yes, Chair. It might be added that not all bylaws cover the whole regional district. Areas are specific with bylaws and have their own needs, and some bylaws do not fit all areas. So it's our responsibilities to make sure that the bylaws that fit our areas are in place for our areas, and the bylaws that will encumber our areas we are exempt from or modify to allow the bylaw to actually serve its purpose for our area. Thank you.
Is there another question from the group?
No, those are all the questions that we had. We just want to take the opportunity to say thank you for allowing us to be part of this session.
Well, thank you. I will go first to Director Bush, who's got his hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to thank Melissa and the students from the grade 3 and 4 class from Costin. It was a great opportunity for Mayor Bauer and I to try and answer some of these questions as well. And I'm really happy with the answers some of the directors give as well. Thank you very much.
And we would definitely say thanks again and see you waving there. Have a great day, and thanks for coming on with us today. Thank you very much.
Put us on the spot.
Yeah, some of those were questions you had to think about. Yes, absolutely. South Okanagan Similkameen Pride Society is our next delegation, CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So we do have the South Okanagan Similkameen Pride Society with us. I believe they're in the Similkameen room, ready to present to committee. And this is an update on some of their activities, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do we have them at the Similkameen room? Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. So I'll try not to read off of my piece of paper in front of me. However, I'm not much of a public speaker, so I get nervous. So I might have to read off of this. So just bear with me if I'm not looking up at you. So I would like to say good morning. My name is Melissa Edgerly and my pronouns are they, them. I'd like to thank the Regional District of the Okanagan Similkameen for having me here today. I'd like to acknowledge that I am on the unceded traditional territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. And I would like to also say that I'm here to represent SOS Pride, which is South Okanagan Similkameen Pride Society. I'd like to thank the RDOS for responding to our letter, requesting that you publicly acknowledge that June is internationally recognized as Pride Month. We were overjoyed when your office reached out to us earlier this year, expressing your interest in participating in Pride Month. We welcome you to acknowledge and celebrate your local 2S LGBTQIA+ community this year in the month of June and demonstrate the inclusiveness of the communities within the regional district of the Okanagan and Similkameen. There are many ways to celebrate Pride Month. Some examples include a public acknowledgement in the form of a declaration at the RDOS directors meeting, such as this one. Recognition of Pride Month on your local social media accounts and the website. Hanging a pride flag at the RDOS offices. Posting pride stickers in the office windows. Supporting a rainbow crosswalk or a sidewalk within the RDOS catchment areas, or making a donation to the 2S LGBTQIA community organizations or to a youth group. In addition, SOS Pride is hosting multiple events throughout the June month that RDOS staff would be welcome to attend or support. On Saturday, June 4th, we are hosting a Pride kickoff event at the Dream Cafe in Penticton from 7 to 11 p.m., showcasing performing artists from our local 2S LGBTQIA community. On Saturday, June 25th, we are hosting the Fruit Float event on the Penticton channel, meeting for music, prizes, and fun at the start of the channel, leaving at 1 o'clock. For details on many more of the events in June, you can visit our Facebook page, which is SOS Pride, or our website, which is sospride.ca. I'm happy to present to you today, unfortunately, you're not here in person, but this little loot bag to present to you our Pride swag bag, including stickers, a mini flag that you can display in your reception spaces and offices. Thank you again for supporting your local 2S LGBTQIA community. Thank you.
Is there any questions from the board? I see a hand from Director Gettens. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have a question, Liz. I just want to say thank you very much for presenting, and you did a great job. So thanks very much for coming. And I think June 4th sounds like a really fun kickoff, so we'll probably see you there.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you for that. Director Olbrich?
Thank you to the chair, and through the chair, I want to make a comment. Human rights and civil rights are very important. Section 1 of our Constitution, Canada Act 1982, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms says, these rights and freedoms are guaranteed, subject only to such reasonable limits as are demonstrably justifiable in a free and democratic society. They're not just important, they're guaranteed. I want to say thank you. Thank you for what you said.
Thank you so much.
And I support your request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Problem? Any other questions? Director Holmes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned the rainbow crosswalks, and I think most of us from municipalities where we have control over our roads have put in rainbow crosswalks. But as you may be aware, in the rural areas, we don't have control over the roads. So I think our options of putting them in rural areas are probably limited. It's a provincial responsibility. So I'm just wondering if you know if there's any outreach to the province, to include rainbow crosswalks in rural areas where they're responsible for the roads.
Sure. Can you answer that, Melissa?
That is a great question. I will try and answer that to the best of my abilities. We personally, as a society, Pride Society organization, have not personally reached out to the province to ask to get rainbow crosswalks in rural communities. I say that we haven't yet, but doesn't mean it's not a thing for the future. We're looking at growing. Unfortunately, we are a member of 5 volunteers. And so some of our focus is within the local communities because we do go from the South Okanagan to Similkameen. Again, there's 5 of us. So we don't have like a tiny army behind us to help going at the provincial level, if that makes sense. But it is something that we're willing to undertake and noted that that is something to do for the future. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Director Kazakovich. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa, for your presentation. And just further to what Director Holmes mentioned, if there's any way your group could reach out to the province and maybe through our local MLAs, that would be helpful. You know, to get crosswalks in rural areas it's so challenging, and I spent years trying to get the province to allow us to have just some white lines painted of where the kids should be crossing. And 2 traffic studies later, the answer was no. So, you know, maybe with your support, we might be able to make something happen. So thank you.
Director Trainer, you had a question?
My question is for our CAO. I'm just wondering, I heard that there was one going out in Coston somewhere, possibly at the elementary school. Do you know if that's still happening?
Oh, I'd have to check on that, sorry.
Okay, I had heard that there was, so it seems like maybe schools would be a good place to put them because maybe there's less red tape to go through.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion. Director McCorduff?
Thank you. In Osoyoos, we do have 2 of them, one at the elementary school, one at the high school. And because it's on school district property, they were able to do it. They could do it on their own. They didn't have to come and check with us.
Worth noting. Well, seeing no more hands, again, I thank you, Melissa, for the presentation. And I know in the past we've supported Pride Month, and we'll do so again in the future. Again, thank you, and we will try, I understand, to maybe get together right after this meeting before you leave for a quick chat. So hang around for a few minutes, please. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, moving on, I do believe Director Obrick had wanted to make a motion.
Yes, and thank you to the chair. The delegation, I don't know if they're still on the line. I wanted to make a motion of support for the request made, and specifically to add in Okanagan Falls as a specific consideration under the option D in the report presented to us on December 16, 2021. And again, we have a report this afternoon coming to us, or as a further 5th option, but in no way to limit any other area that may have a desire to put before this board proper information of options and considerations. And that's my motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Is there someone wanting to second that? My first and initial thought would be is that might be more appropriate during the discussion this afternoon while we're talking about that.
My thinking is we're in committee, and if we make the motion in committee, it can be properly before the board and have been put forth by committee.
Yeah, well, generally anything coming from a committee has to go to the board for further approval. So
Yes.
you would have to redo the same motion
I'll
in the
redo
board
the
meeting
same
again.
motion this afternoon, but I thought we were in committee and it would be an appropriate place to have the conversation.
I'm not opposed to it by any means, but is there a seconder for the proposed motion? Seconded? Any discussion on it? I don't think there's anybody that I'm missing. Seeing no questions or hands, I'll call the question on that. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Director Bush opposed. Am I missing anybody else? Motion carries anyway. And looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. And I do believe we've got a few minutes before we move into the hospital district meeting, so let's take a quick break and catch a coffee and whatnot.
Mark?
and ready to go?
I just saw Dan on there.
Yeah. All right, we will get going again here, and I will turn it over to Director Johansson for the Regional Hospital District meeting. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Pendergraft. I'll call this meeting of Okanagan-Sinoqualmie Regional Hospital District to order at 10:46, and I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Moved. Second. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, and we got the minutes of the last meeting. The recommendation is that the February 17th, 2022 minutes of the Okanagan-Sinoqualmie Regional Hospital District be adopted. Can I get a mover of that motion? Moved. Second. Any further discussion on those minutes? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. We have a delegation here from Interior Health. We have Dan Goffner, Corporate Business Operations South Director, John Clare, Interim Executive Director, Clinical Operations, and Jana Abikoff, Director of Primary Care, South Okanagan, and they're here to present to the board in regards to potential future projects and the primary care network. At the request of Interior Health, they've asked us to have this discussion in a closed meeting. So the recommendation is that in accordance with Section 92B of the Community Charter, the board close the meeting to the public on the basis of the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the regional district and a provincial government or federal government or both, or between the provincial government or federal government or both, and a third party. Can I get a motion to close the meeting? Moved and second. I call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And I will pass it over to Dan.
I just need a sec too.
Okay, just 1 sec, Dan.
Sure.
Get Danny a chance to shut us down.
Okay, I think we're ready to get started. I believe we've got enough for a quorum. So I will call the Regional District Okanagan-Snoqualmie regular board meeting to order. A reminder that anything be removed off the consent agenda and put into the regular meeting. Now is the time to do that. Is there anything to be removed from consent? I don't see any hands on that. So looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries. On to the consent agenda, corporate issues. Looking for a motion to adopt. Moved, seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries. Only the consent agenda, corporate services or corporate issues. So down to development services. Item B1, CAO.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So we have had a petition from residents in the Workman Place and Kettle Ridge subdivisions to be added into the Naramata Fire Service area. So we're sitting at third reading on the amendment to that service establishment bylaw, and we're looking for adoption.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Kozakovich.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the administrative recommendation.
Okay, seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on this? Seeing no hands, call the question. All those in favor? Corporate votes. Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. B2, official community plan and zoning amendment for area F, CAO.
We did a geotechnical review of the Greater West Bench area last year, Mr. Chair, and there were some recommendations in there that need to be attached to the Area F official community plan. And we're sitting at third reading of the amendments to the official community plan and the zoning bylaw to attach those, and we're looking for adoption on both.
Okay, go to Director Gettins, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move the administrative recommendation.
Moved. Seconder on that. Thank you. Discussion on this? Seeing no hands again. Well, this one's a rural vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Motion carries. Down to Section C, Public Works. OK Falls Irrigation District conversion, CAO.
We were approached by the Okanagan Falls Irrigation District last year, Mr. Chair, to convert their 4 services over to the regional district. So that's the water system, a park, a cemetery, and the street lighting for Okanagan Falls. And we have since completed the necessary assessments that we need to do, the engineering and the financial. And at their April AGM, the Okanagan Falls Irrigation District voted to dissolve and to borrow the necessary money to make corrections to the water system. And they are now ready for us to determine whether we want to accept the conversion to the regional district. And we are recommending that we approve the acquisition of the Okanagan Falls Irrigation District, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Olbrich. This is in your area.
Thank you very much to the chair. And I just want to point out again, excellent support from staff, good process, 92.5% community support. That's pretty high for almost anything we ever do. So I am very grateful, and I do move the administrative recommendation.
Okay, moved, seconded, thank you. Discussion on this? Looking around. Again, Seeing no hands, this is a corporate vote, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Again, motion carries. Down to C2, OK Falls Landfill Operations Contract Extension, CAO.
So the existing contract for the operation of the Okanagan Falls landfill is with Wildstone Environmental, and that contract is expiring. And it's for the reuse of construction and demolition waste, Mr. Chair. It's sort of a proprietary methodology that Wildstone has come up with, and we want to exercise the option to extend that contract for one more term. Over the 5 years, there is an escalation clause in the existing contract based on the cost of living index. So we're comfortable with that, Mr. Chair, and we're recommending that we do extend that contract for 5 years.
Again to Director Ober.
Yes, and thank you to the chair. And again, I just want to comment with appreciation to the wonderful job done, Mr. Reeder specifically, his department. When we look at 93% of waste that's being received at this landfill being diverted, and you look at the cost and the life and how that's being managed as part of the regional landfill service, and his good work in providing clarification, information, understanding. Sometimes in community there's confusion, and that's important because this landfill is different from the one we have in Campbell Mountain. But when we look at the results, I just want to say thank you, and I'll move the administrative recommendation.
Okay, moved. Seconder for that. Thank you. Any discussion? I don't think I'm missing any hands. Again, this is a corporate vote. It is weighted, but we'll see how the vote goes as to whether we need to do it individually. So corporate vote, all those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. So, great. Down to community services. D1, corporate office siting study, terms of reference.
As long as we were, as long as the two organizations were moving forward in the same window. So we're proposing that we retain Colliers, who did the city study, to look at doing the expanded scope on the cornerstone study that we had done previously. And they gave us 4 scenarios that they thought was what we were looking for. And that's what we want to test with the board, Mr. Chair, is to make sure that these 4 strategies that Colliers is proposing meet the requirements for that expanded scope expectation that the board was looking for. So the 4 strategies are set out in the administrative report, Mr. Chair. So just for the benefit of the public, the first one was to look at the benefits of either expanding or renovating at 101 Martin. The second was that we build a new facility on the current site. The third one was that we acquire or lease a new facility on a new site, which may be pertinent for the Okanagan Falls presentation that we had this morning, or that we continue to look at doing a joint facility with the city of Penticton on a mutually agreeable site. So those were the 4 scenarios presented, Mr. Chair, and we appreciate the board's discussion on that. But our administrative recommendation is that we approve that terms of reference and that we go ahead and retain Colliers for up to $15,000 to do that workspace plan.
Okay, thank you. Looking for direction from the board. Director Coyne is moving it. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you. It's on the floor. Any discussion on it? Director Olbrich?
I have 6 or 7 questions, and I don't even know if I'm allowed to ask that many questions. It's awkward, so I'll ask permission to ask the questions before I ask them.
Well, let's start with a couple. See if we can answer those.
Oh, okay. I understand Colliers did a report for the city. Would it be okay for us to have a copy of that report and review?
CAO?
I believe that was a public study, Mr. Chair, that was certainly discussed at their council. So I would say yes.
Okay.
Can it be provided to all the board members, or should I go to the city and ask a copy and then distribute it myself?
I think it could be provided if we find it.
Yeah.
Once we find it.
The second question, I'm curious what the price was on the Collier study for the Penticton City.
That I can't answer, and I'm not sure the CAO could either.
But could we ask the city? I'd be curious to see how much they've spent on that report as a matter of interest. This Collier's report that's being proposed looks like it's going to be supplemental, and all that work they've done and paid for, I'm assuming gives us a benefit, because that's, I'm gonna ask a new question. Is that the reason we're going to use Colliers as recommended?
First, to answer your second one, or your second question
Well,
about
maybe
the cost?
the second question first, because the first relates to the second, but I think the second question illuminates why the first question. If that's the reason we're using Colliers, I'd like to see not only the work, but I'd like to know the cost of that work.
Okay. CAO, is that the main reason we're using Colliers?
We can ask the city what the initial study costs, Mr. Chair, and see if they'll provide that. Colliers, this seems to me to be more of a feasibility study. It's like, let's find the best site and then find out what the ramifications of the various scenarios are. Colliers is a real estate, sort of a real estate expert for commercial operations. They seem to be the best one. And then there should be an economy of scale with the work that they've already done for the city and the regional district as far as a workspace allocation.
Okay.
So the answer to my second question sounds like it's yes, in part, if not in total. And the answer to my first question is, I can ask the city.
Yeah, and unless one of the council members wants to answer that.
Or maybe Mr. Rieger knows.
I see a hand from Director Robinson. I'll go to her first.
Yeah, I have no idea how much the study costs, but I'm sure we could get it to you quickly. All you would have to do is just phone the city and ask.
Okay.
It was
in my spare time, I'll call.
You would prefer me to use my time to call them and then call you?
No, I was hoping staff could help by getting the answer to all of us personally. That was my hope.
Okay. Anything further?
Yes, I'm curious what the cost was on the coronation study that we had reported to the board December 16, 2021.
CAO?
I'd have to ask Mr. Woods to jump in on that one, Mr. Chair.
I just don't remember at the board level discussing it in budget or approving it. I just don't know how that decision was even made, what it cost. I'm just curious.
I vaguely remember it, but I don't remember the cost. So is Mr. Woods, can you recall what that cost? I see he's on there.
I'm just looking that up now, Chair. I'm just looking that up now. I can get that to you as quickly as I can.
Okay. The next question, or?
I've heard from community, and I don't even know if it's true, but I've heard that the coronation, the report we received December 16 was based on a much larger report done by coronation, maybe 100 or more pages. And I wondered if we could get a copy of that delivered to the board. The first question is that true? And if so, could we get a copy?
I forget who did that original study, but
Coronation.
CAO?
Are we talking about the Cornerstone study, Mr. Chair?
I misspoke. I meant Cornerstone. I said Coronation by error. Yes,
Okay.
Cornerstone.
Certainly,
Yes.
we can provide that.
Yeah, it would refresh all our memories. That was quite some time ago, so.
Well, my clarification question is, we had about 13 pages on our agenda in December, and community has told me the actual document prepared by Cornerstone was much heavier, much more detailed.
Yeah, it was
Is there-
significant. If I
So the
recall.
support document, I don't recall ever seeing. I'd just like to see it.
I'm sure we can do that. Any other discussion on this? Am I missing any hands online? I don't believe so. Okay, Director Monteith?
To the chair, under strategy B, looking at building a new facility with a new site, does that mean other communities would be considered, like Okanagan Falls, Princeton, or Kearney-S? Like, would it be a larger examination of availability, or is it just very targeted?
CAO?
That would be the intent, Mr. Chair, is we'd look within the regional district.
Okay, so it's not limited to city of Penticton per se, it's the entire
No.
regional district, okay?
Yes.
All right, any further questions or discussion? Go ahead, Director Ober.
A further question. I remember Director Getton's motion on December 16, 2021. My memory could be wrong, but I thought there was request for taking a look at the terms of reference. I'm not sure if this document we have today is all there is, but I do recall Cornerstone repeatedly had difficulty answering questions, and I do recall Mr. Woods indicating the reason they couldn't answer the questions was because the terms of reference did not permit them to address those questions, which led, I believe, to Director Getton's motion so that we could take some care here that the terms of reference were broad enough so that those questions, which are really what's at issue here, could get, proper questions, could get proper answers. Proper answers means this is the public trust. It's the public taxpayers' money. The services belong to the public. And when we're making a decision, as we were asked to do on December 16th, for 17 million or more, I think it's good to have answers to these questions. I remember Director Johansson commented about being careful about costs, which I agree. But when we're looking at the cost of land alone, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe seven figures may be in the balance here when it comes to cost. So, having those answers to me matters a lot. That's why I'm wondering, does this when I read this report the last few days, I didn't see terms of reference that allowed the consultant to be able to give answers. Again, December 16, consultant couldn't give answers. So I understood the motion was to broaden those terms of reference so we could indeed get those answers. The meeting's recorded. There was a lot of questions that weren't answered. We could look at the recording to be specific on all those questions to which we didn't have answers.
CAO, your
I'd
thoughts
have to
on
refer
the
back
terms
to
of
Mr.
reference?
Woods.
Okay. Mr. Woods?
Yeah, specifically, the terms of reference that have been provided by Colliers are what we have on the report, the 4 strategies. The other thing I would add to that to supplement it in the last line there is from a scheduling perspective, they've indicated they'd get the report back in draft form in 8 weeks, present that to the board, and then incorporate comments, as they say, receiving comments. So there's an opportunity certainly to chime in once they've provided the draft. But as has been stated, we tried to capture the intention of the board's hopes there for expanding the scope of work with these 4 options. So Colliers tried to keep it concise, but really specifically citing hard, tangible costs related to a building needs assessment that's been done, and then from a locations perspective. So those are the terms of reference, and certainly we can go back to Colliers and expand that if there's any additional needs, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any luck on the cost that you were looking for?
On the costs, I will follow up with not only the costs, but those copies that have been requested to the board as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. Director Holmes?
What is a quantity survey?
Good question. CEO?
So typically, if you hire a consultant to do a design on a building, they'll hire a quantity surveyor who's an expert in estimating much more in a much more detailed way than just an architect or an engineer would do. And then during the project, they'll update the estimates as you go along based on whether there are change orders or what they would see as bumps in the costs that would affect the estimates. But the quantity surveyor is the one that would do the estimation of the project.
Estimation of what?
The cost
Yeah, cost
estimate?
estimation.
Yes. Okay. Am I seeing missing any hands? Just go ahead, Director Holmes, follow up.
So just to follow up, so if a quantity survey is required, it would fall outside the scope of this, but then the scope is to identify the costs. I don't understand. I'm a bit confused about whether you need a quantity survey or not.
CEO?
Yeah, you know, costing is so volatile these days. You know, if we do want to get good estimates on these options that Colliers is going to bring in, I'd recommend a quantity surveyor. If we just want sort of ballpark type of estimates, I think like Colliers is a realtor, really a commercial realtor firm. So they can give us sort of an appraisal maybe on that, but you wouldn't get good estimates just from Colliers, I don't think. If that's not necessary, if that would be a step down the road, then we probably don't need a quantity surveyor right now. If we just want to do sort of the feasibility part of it to see what the best methodology is, we could do get the quantity surveyor once the board actually decides to go ahead with a project and they picked a location and a sort of a design.
Okay, thank you. Director Robinson?
Yes, thank you through the chair. I would certainly like to go that way because anybody that's trying to buy plywood on a day-to-day basis knows how volatile the market is right now, and we're way ahead, we're light years away from needing that information. So I would be much in favor of putting the surveyor off until such time as the board decides what it wants to do.
Kind of makes sense. Director Obrecht, did I see a hand?
I had a question on process, Mr. Chair. Motion was made in committee this morning, which may or may not impact on the motion before us. So the question I have is do we, you know, to bring that motion this morning forward, do we amend this motion to incorporate, or do we deal with this first and add that on? What would be a good way to handle that?
I'm not sure that motion was actually necessary when we look at this scope, but if you feel you want to add it.
I think if it's not necessary, there's no harm to add it on.
No.
So let's add it on by amendment. I'll make the amendment.
Make
If
sure
somebody
we
will
include-
second it, perhaps.
You're moving it?
Yeah, I'll move it as an amendment.
Amendment? Seconder for that? Seconded? Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question on the amendment to include OK Falls for sure in this. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none. Motion carries. It is amended. We do have the motion on the floor for the scope with the 4 items. Any further discussion on that?
Director Roberts.
Am I missing Director Roberts? Oh, okay. Sorry, Director Roberts, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just jumping the gun.
Oh, okay. You're down in that bottom corner. I have to reach up or heads up to see you down there. Director Ober.
I just want to speak to this quickly. I'm going to support the motion as amended with trepidations and concern. I want to see those other documents that I've requested. I think this study will give us more information. I don't see it as a final destination. I see it as a stepping stone on a process. I see no urgency. We have an election in October. This is unlikely to get much action before a new board. So I think as a stepping stone forward with trepidations, and I'm looking forward to seeing these other documents and costs. I think all of us care about the costs, and you know, I do for sure. So I'm sure I'm not alone. So I'm looking forward to receiving the information provided, but I will support this motion as amended with trepidation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing no hands, I will call the question on the motion as amended. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to D2, Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission support, CAO.
This came out of committee, Mr. Chair. We had a recommendation from one of the Parks and Recreation Commissions that wanted additional communication with regional district staff at their monthly meetings, I believe. So we took that away, and we determined that, I mean, always our problem with evening meetings is staff support when we've got them working full-time during the day, and then having the resources necessary in order to attend meetings at night. So our recommendation out of this is that put this off to the 2023 budget so we can find out exactly what the board wants with communications to the recreation commissions, and then make sure that we have the necessary resources in the budget in order to provide that service. But I'll turn this over to Mr. Woods to discuss further how we came up with this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I mean, good discussion this morning with respect to Mr. Garris and his team's outlook on their meetings. We're somewhat similar, but also different in that we're not application based. Our programs or Parks and Recreation Commissions that advisory to you. They chime in on really anything that's community based, from events to hard surfacing in parks. So lots of great conversations that happen. There's 6 commissions. They all are varied in their involvement level. So when we looked at this, what we thought would be important to do is to really hone in on what we're doing today and how it's changed over the years. When I got involved with the commissions around about 2007, they were informal as it relates to the RDOS and our organization. We tried as best we could to support them on a case-by-case basis. Around 2008-9, we started to formalize that. And then right up to when bylaw 2732 was amended in 2016 is when it became, very formal. That's when we had already created a fairly defined structure for how we go about operating parks and recreation and really all extended services from that. Our staff had grown quite a bit. Our service levels had grown quite a bit. A lot of new spaces acquired, buildings built, facilities created. So the advisory commissions have always been just a wonderful tool for us to be able to engage with. And it needs to be said, we do also engage with other groups in the communities and the broader communities as a whole. We've started to introduce some surveys within the service areas to get direct feedback from all residents within those areas. So the commissions continue to be a very good help for us as staff to bounce ideas off, and also they bounce their ideas off us. And that is part of what has become somewhat difficult at times. We have to come up with, as is pointed out in the report, we're an objectives based organization. You as a board spend a lot of time looking at where you want to go as an organization, and then we budget accordingly. In that community environment is where a lot of wonderful ideas get generated. So one of the challenges we have is being able to, hear that, bring it in, and then systematically cost it, bring it forward to you for deliberation, and ultimately build it into our operating plans moving forward. So what we used over the last couple of years, we have an annual orientation process that we've now referred to as our Community Commission Symposium. And it's intended really to have some direct feedback, a little back and forth with the commissions. As it were, with pandemic, our meetings went to online, so the online structure was helpful for us. It allowed many of you as board members to participate as well, and gave us a chance to have all of the varying RDOS departments come in and speak to their involvement with what the commissions ultimately do. And that included legislative services from a meeting procedural perspective, finance with respect to budgeting, and then really the whole gamut of community services as well. A couple of the big takeaways there, I think that the commissions in general support where we're going with the process. But one of the big items that we picked up on and coming out of that and receiving feedback on the 2 iterations in the last 2 years that we've done on that symposium was a need to have a formalized process for onboarding their ideas and their projects. So we certainly balance that with the needs of this organization. We have a lot of facilities and a lot of assets that are already built. So we need to ensure that there's resources and funding in place to keep them in good shape, and when they need to be replaced. So introducing new items, we want to make sure that there's a capacity for that. So what we did, and in the report, we've outlined, I've got 2 examples in there that we've added, which we shared back to the commissions that outline our onboarding, we call it, of projects. So in the first 4 months of the year, we asked the commissions to sort of consider what they've been really considering all year. We asked them to formalize and go through a process to rank and prioritize what they'd like to see happen within the communities. And that can be anything from a new acquisition or a new build, or an expanded or reduced service level in one of the programs. We asked that we get that back from them right around now. We've been getting those lists back in, and then we have an opportunity as staff to go through what we call a pre-feasibility. We look at each of those items. We do a cost analysis on those, impact analysis. What does it mean to the community? Does it involve other stakeholders? Does it involve acquisition of land, and come back with a better estimate of what those projects would mean? And at that point, we look for them to, again, formalize, do we want to keep this in the queue, and ultimately make a recommendation to you as a full board through the respective directors who are involved. We expect are involved in that throughout the entire process, back up to budget. So by the time it makes it to budget, we've had an opportunity not only to get that idea from them, but run it through our process to make sure that we've considered all the different aspects of it, so we can give you the details we need to, so that you can make informed decisions during budget. I talk a little bit about in the report about our interaction and our processes. Each of our commissions are, I said earlier, are different. Some have more time than others. Some have more interest than others. It's often based on the depth of their services or the amount of facilities and operations they have. Generally, it's about interest. One thing Bylaw 2732 does not do is define the depth or the amount of time staff spend with commissions. A little bit along the same lines of what Mr. Garish pointed out, nothing really defining the amount of time. Really, in the end, it's a discretionary call we make based on budgets, based on the amount of involvement we need. And obviously, we have lots of situations where they want more of our time, and we would very much like to provide that. We just need to be cognizant of the fact that, and as has been stated by the CAO, work-life balance is important for everybody. With the introduction of online meetings, it's certainly changed how we have our meetings. It's opened it up. It's made it more available. I've provided some analysis that staff have done based on time tracking of the types of things that we do for our commissions in building up for these evening meetings typically, and the number of hours. I mean, rough calculations, about 140 hours per person, so per employee, in support of each commission. And that's specifically to just setting up and preparing for a meeting, even something as simple. And we know Mr. Francisco is behind the curtain here running this meeting. Setting up a WebEx meeting takes time, it takes knowledge, and it's got to be done in a certain way. So for each of our meetings that happen throughout the month, it's time consuming, and that really doesn't even delve into whether or not there's special requests or special interest to talk about projects. So it is challenging for us. We have you as a board and 6 other groups really to report to in a way and present to and provide details on. So I really wanted to just cast this as wide as possible to showcase what we're currently doing. And the recommendation, as has been stated, we think it should be considered in a more in-depth way in the budget process, if that's an interest for us to spend more time with the commissions in the future, Chair. And I'll leave it to that in case there's any questions.
Dr. Obrecht?
Yes, thank you to the chair. And I want to speak to this a little bit. It means a lot to Area D, a lot. Earlier today, we heard from Mr. Garish, and Mr. Woods commented, good discussion. Just clarification for Mr. Woods' benefit. There was no discussion. It's been put over. Mr. Garish spoke, but that was all. There's more work to be done on that discussion, which will come later. In this moment, I understand the work-life balance. I understand our organizational capacity limitations, all that stuff aside. The concern I have is balance and respect. We are providing services to the public, to the taxpayer, public service. They pay the taxes. This is their community. It's their service. The Local Government Act creates the advisory commissions, both advisory planning and Parks and Rec, for a reason. And I've served on both of those commissions prior to being elected. I sit ex officio since I've been elected. And when you're in a municipality, and there's 10 members of this board who are from municipalities, you don't have this reality. When you're in and there's members of this board who are electoral areas who don't have this reality, don't even have a Parks and Rec Commission or advisory, so they don't have the reality either. When you're in a municipality, you're elected, probably at large, there's democratic accountability, and the community can, I mean, the council itself probably are quite aware of what's going on in your municipality, whatever the park project or whatever the advisory planning commission issue might be. Indeed, you could say in a municipality, you don't even need these commissions because the council members, the mayors and the elected officials know quite a bit. When the regional district system was created, the reason these advisory commissions were in there was because in a board like this, which is called a federation, it's a complicated term. We have the electoral areas, 9 of them, which are really a ward system. We don't vote for the electoral area director in rural Princeton or rural Osoyoos, for example. And those elected officials don't have the same community we do. And they don't know us the way we know us. So we don't have that ability to even vote for or against these board members. 10 are appointed, we don't vote for or against them. So how does this board of 19 do the job? Well, the answer is the advisory commissions are advisory to the board. My opinion, it's the duty of each electoral area director to attend those meetings. Our minutes are not very good. And when it comes up at the board, it's our job, as Director Monty said earlier today, to represent our community concern. Bring it to the attention of the 18 other good people here who care, who listen, who pay attention. How do we do that? Well, the advisory commissions is where we have low-cost, high-value community engagement, feedback, and these people who step up and volunteer, if you know them, they're high-quality, good people. They know things, they care. They're the grandparents in our system. This board are the parents. The staff are the children. When the parents are making a decision, they call the grandparents for advice. Now, we know the grandparents don't control the parents' decision, but the grandparents can say, we love you, we love the grandchildren, we care, and here's what we advise. Now, the grandparents know they're not making the decision. They know the parents, the board is, but on what basis does the board make the decision? So all the way down to staff. And I spoke with Ali Mina on this when he was here, and I got counsel from him. He's amazing. And the staff are a resource to the purpose for the commission to ask a proper question, get a proper answer, give the advice. That's the role. Our role is to consider that advice, not only, but in balance with other information we get, and then we make the decision. If we take away from that process proper resource, our advice quality goes down, our board effectiveness goes down, our quality of delivery of service to community goes down, our community frustration goes up. Not a good foreseeable outcome. Foreseeable, but not a good outcome. When we talk about roles, we need role confusion minimized. I sit on these commissions. It's not hard. These are intelligent people. They can understand the role quite well. Staff also need to understand the role, and the board and management and the public. When we get into the cost, I'm all in favor of efficiencies. Staff complain. I've heard staff say they don't want to drive all the way to OK Falls. Well, we can now do it we have the technology. They can join for a period of time. The work they're doing, my goodness, they should be doing it, right? They should be doing the work. It's not, I mean, we have members of community that they're not available, they work. And some work evenings and nights at the hospital or at the 7-Eleven or elsewhere. They all work, not all, but a lot of people work. It's a job. The job is you show up at the time required. And if it's in our community, we have about 11 meetings a year. 11 meetings. We could have one every month, every second Thursday for Parks and Rec. We usually take a month off historically. So we're talking 11 meetings. 11 meetings for staff to attend? What, an hour per meeting? This is too much to ask. I don't support this direction. I didn't support what Mr. Garish said this morning. I understand how hard it is when you lose staff. Last year, we lost every one of our planners with increasing demands. What a disaster. That reflects on us, by the way. We're the Board of Oversight. We have budget authority. We've got to pay attention to those organizational capacity limitations. EOC, we spoke here at the board. So all of this comes into the balance, but I just wanted to say, I don't support the direction of taking away from these communities staff who can answer a proper question with a proper answer. These commissions, which we rely on at this board for advice. Thank you for letting me speak. I appreciate it a lot.
So Director Monti, I was going to say Sabrina.
To the chair, I do support what Director O'Rourke is saying. It is important that we do receive this information. We have advisory commissions because we want their advice, and that is our opportunity. I do know that my commission, when we have nothing pressing on the agenda, we may not have a meeting in a month. And I do see the balance there, but I do feel that when we miss meetings, it becomes harder to pull the advisory committee together. It becomes easy to not attend because they've missed a meeting but when staff don't attend, the meeting is very different. And it's sometimes harder as an elected official to have a healthy conversation and move forward with projects because there's questions and then there's a mystery because staff isn't there and it actually is harder. So I agree that we need to have staff there, even if it is for a short time, to just help explain policy, procedure, workload, and before staff leave, if they have that opportunity, just ask questions before they get to the discussion point so that they understand what they're asking of the board if they're going to make a motion. So I agree. I think that we need to keep staff involved. I understand that it is, it's evening work and nobody likes that, but it is part of the job when we are running a public service, and that's Parks and Recreations.
Okay, Director Gettins.
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to acknowledge that it's important for sure. The commissions are important, and to hear their advice as a board member is really critical for all of our areas. But I also really hear the struggle with staff. right now. And this expectation that we have on people to work overtime. And then in light of having emergencies and those kind of things we have to deal with on an ongoing basis, it seems like in the summer. And we can't keep adding to people's workflows and work expectations without taking something away, or without adding more resources. It's not fair. And we are in a real situation where we have a great team of planners and we've just lost another one. And like that's a core service. And a lot of the work, the community services have core services, but we have so many services. And I just have to say, I feel for staff. I think it is a lot. I think that you work so you have a good living and a good lifestyle and you get to live in this area. But I do think there is that balance. And as a board, we have to support that. And we need to look at it bigger than just how we work with commissions or what we heard from the planning manager this morning. There's something going on here that we do need to pay attention to, and we don't have enough resources for the expectations that we need out of this office. I just feel like we're asking too much. That's why we're always feeling like we're behind on things or things are taking too long. And I think we really need to take a good look at this at the budget and make sure there's enough time to really explore these opportunities and these different options that staff are presenting. Because when we hear from managers, they're representing their staff. And if there's tension and stress happening at the staff level, we don't want to lose our staff. It's too hard to get them back. So I just wanted to thank both the managers today and just thanks for bringing it forward. And I think we should keep it on the forefront as we move forward. And when we add something new, recognize we got to take something away. Otherwise our staff just cannot keep up. Thanks.
Okay, I would just remind everybody that we're not saying no, staff aren't going. And we're not saying yes, they are all the time. This is to put it forward to next session or next term budget to see how much support we can actually give them. And maybe we need to add more money to the situation. But I have one other, before I go to you, Director Robrick, I'm going to Director Roberts.
Thank you to the chair. I think it's for a follow-up in regards to what Director to support and understand the stress that we put staff under. So not only our expectation levels, but when we look to support a way forward, we do have technology. We've learned a lot through the COVID. I think it's important. I think one of the things with our COVID funds, we were able to get smart boards, the ability to be able to have sectioned areas throughout the RDOS where people could gather, staff can still be where they need to be. And then again, yes, for the budgeting process moving forward, our expectation levels, we need to have a list on what the amount of numbers of projects and the amount of people, and do we need to hire more people? And then it becomes problematic if we don't have people to hire, then we have to decrease our expectations. And again, then it's a triaging our priority list. I think there's a way forward. I think we may even have to look at different styles, managing styles on how we use staff. A lot of times we have people putting in a lot of effort off the edge of each of their tables, whether or not they're in community services, whether or not they're in they're in public works, etc. Maybe there needs to be more like a community resilience coordinator, somebody that coordinates some of the asks that the electoral area people have concerns, and help funnel that and prioritize it and make it more efficient in time use, and not having managers having to work from each of their designated areas. So I think there's a lot of room for different discussions. I again applaud this being brought forward, and yes, it's a necessity as we move forward into the following year's strategic planning and budgeting. Thank you.
Is it something new to add, Director Roberts?
Well, just arising, Mr. Chair, if I may speak.
If it's new information, go ahead.
Yeah, it's arising. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the permission to speak. What I'm hearing, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, so clarification would be appreciated. I'm not hearing any suggestion of increasing any load on staff over historical normal. What I'm hearing is cuts, and specific cuts of staff attending, maybe at all, these meetings, which are so important. It will do harm, it will cause dysfunction. And when we're taking away, and that's what this discussion's about. Now, I agree We have big issues when it comes to retention, organizational capacity. I agree, better is better. I'm in favor of better. I support better. I don't have issue with this going to the 2023 Budget Committee, but I'm speaking specific to the direction which I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm mistaken. I'm hearing years of normal being changed to less. That's a change. It's not more, it's less.
It's a potential, something that may happen in the future, and it will be a future discussion.
Thank you.
Director Point?
Yeah, first off, I want to say, you know, Director Obrick, I know you love taking swipes at municipal directors, but we have about 15 different portfolios with, you know, 4 or 5 different committees in every one of those portfolios. So despite what you think, we all have pretty heavy workload. So you don't have to comment to that. I'm just saying, you need to understand that you're not the only one that has to go to these meetings. Now, you said you have 11 meetings a year in your commissions, but plus the rest of everybody around here. That's about 100 meetings a year that staff have to go to. That's above and beyond the regular workload. There's 260 roughly days before you take your holidays out, work days in a year. At some point we have to realize, and I'm not just directing it to you, but I'm just saying because you brought it up. At some point we have to realize that if we're going to expect our staff to work an extra 100 days of overtime, that is not really acceptable. So when we say we're going to take this to the budget for next year, I think it needs to be a budget issue. I think everybody who needs these services needs to start ponying up a little bit so that they have the money in their budgets to be able to do these things. Because we cannot expect our staff to continue to work at this workload and keep them. I would never expect my staff at the municipal level to work 100 extra days of overtime and then still have them there the next morning. It just wouldn't happen. They would quit. And what's happening every single day right now, our staff is quitting because they're overworked and they're frustrated. So you need to realize that too. So as much as you want to get on your soapbox, you have to understand there's a lot more going on around here and accept that. So next year, put it in your budget so that there's money there. That's all I gotta say.
That's the intent of this, and not a rebuttal.
No,
if you're
Mr.
willing
Chair,
to
with
move the
permission.
motion.
No, I'd like to speak in response to what the director
Sorry,
from.
point of order, Mr. Chairman.
This isn't a debate.
Point of order,
debate
please.
Yes, go ahead, Director Robinson.
Thank you. Just on a point of order, unless I'm missing something, this was just a recommendation for additional reporting and additional support to go to the Budget Committee. We're getting way off track here. The only thing on the table is whether it's going to go to budget. So if you want more staff, put it in the budget next year. But could we move on, please?
That's the intent. So somebody willing to make the motion? Move?
Yes.
Seconder for that? Thank you. Any discussion on that? And it is a corporate vote. Director Monteith?
To the chair, I just want to clarify there is no change to operations right now.
That's my understanding, but I'll go to the CAO for that. Is there any change to operations as they are today?
I think our current approach is to report out to commissions on a quarterly basis, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And that's going to stay in place?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Go ahead, Director Monteith.
The chair, staff have been coming to meetings. If they're only going to come quarterly, does that mean you only get them 4 times a year?
This is Parks and Recreation.
Correct.
Specifically Parks and Recreation, I don't know that, but
Because that would be a change to operations right now.
how often does your commission meet?
Whenever we have a meeting, they attend. If there's anything on the agenda that they would need to speak to, they attend. If it's only quarterly, that is a change.
Okay. So we're not asking for a change at this point, though. We're just saying this goes to budget next year. Everybody's clear on that? Call the question, corporate vote, all in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to finance, Town of Princeton Security Issuing Bylaw, CAO.
The town of Princeton has passed a borrowing bylaw to do upgrades to their water and wastewater systems, Mr. Chair, up to $7 million. And based on the MFA requirements, that has to go through the regional district. So we are recommending that that get 4 readings.
Okay, go to Director Coyne.
I'd like to make a motion.
Mover, seconder, thank you. Any discussion on this? This is a standard procedure for these types of things. So I will call the question, corporate votes, all those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Down to item F, no, nothing there. G, CAO reports, CAO.
Oh, nothing new for me, Mr. Chair.
Down to chair's report, nothing new from me this go around unless Director Coyne has something to add as he was acting chair in my absence.
I will say that Monday we had a tabletop exercise across the regional district. For the most part, it went pretty good. It was entertaining.
Entertaining.
To say the least. You're getting phone calls from people that are supposed to be somebody else and it's not them. But it went pretty well. I think we found some weaknesses and places we need to work together to strengthen. So, yeah, I think that's
okay. Thank you for that. Board representation. Nothing from the MFA, nothing from the Municipal Insurance Association. OBWB, Director Kordoff.
Thank you. You probably have all received the May report of the meeting. I get it. I'm hoping that the rest of you get it as well. We had a really interesting speaker, Carrie Alex, who is the ONA fisheries biologist. She was talking about stream restoration and environmental flow needs for fish, and she did it and presented it as the fish, not as the biologist, and it was quite interesting. Director Holmes was there as well, and I thought it just made you sort of think. Okay, let's, as we've said many times today, we need to put ourselves in other people's positions and understand how we all work together. So that was interesting. Some milfoil is being picked up at many of the lakes in the Okanagan, including Osoyoos, and some students at UBC, engineering students, have tried to improve the way that the milfoil is picked up and transported, which is a huge cost because of the weight. So they've come up with some kind of a plan to dry out the milfoil before it gets offloaded and hopefully save money, which we're all in favor of. So on June the 22nd, there's a workshop on boating, supporting boats and infrastructure at marinas, that type of thing. That's in another month. And make water work, which doesn't seem to be a high priority right now because of the rain and the cool that we've had. But mayors in the Okanagan, and I would think other people too, maybe regional district directors, are been asked to do videos, a 1-minute video, and send it in to make people aware of how they can support Make Water Work. I know that Oliver and Osoyoos have done theirs. and that's it. And the report is, I'm sure, being sent to you. So please have a look at it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Okanagan Film Commission, Director Gettins.
Thanks, Chair. So next week there's a movie filming in Naramata, and next month there's an indie movie being filmed in Penticton, and John reports that there are more than 22 movies in process in the next 3 months within the Okanagan. So they're still quite busy.
Sounds that way. Okanagan Regional Library, Director Monteith.
We met yesterday. We're actively working on recruitment for our CAO. Working towards budget for 2023.
Okay, thank you. Sterile insect release, Director Bush.
Yes, we had a meeting and I will forward the report when it comes through. We just had our meeting last Friday, so.
Okay, thank you. Simia, I attended that in place of Director Knodel. Not much changing there, with the exception of some potential new folks coming on board. I'll just leave that there for now. Potentially.
Just do it.
Starting control. Director Bush, anything there?
Yeah, we have a meeting at the end of the month, I think the 30th.
Okay. Fire Chiefs Liaison Committee, there is a meeting tonight on that, so report back later. Nothing on the Indigenous Council or Joint Council. Hospital District, anything new there? We just met today, so I'm assuming all good. Anything under Director's motions? Director Roberts, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'd like to make a notice of motion in regards to the development of a letter coming from the RDOS in regards to the appeal electoral boundaries issues around the Similkameen, as we want to stay cohesively together. The Similkameen in and of itself operates using a lot of the same resources of the health services, our transportation corridor, our relationship with First Nations, and of course, all encompassed in the RDOS. And we believe that it's incredibly important that we stay together in our electoral area. There has already been a letter put together by the village of Karamias, and I believe by Princeton, and sent off, and I think they've given a copy to the RDOS. So I'd like to make a motion that we send off a letter to the electoral commission in regards to our boundaries so that we can maintain and have the Similkameen together. Thank you.
Okay, and this is the federal electoral area boundaries,
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
Okay. And did you want to deal with that today, or is it okay to come back at the next meeting?
Well, if it could pass right, if I can make that a motion right now, and if people are accepting.
We can, it just needs 2/3 of the board to approve dealing with that now, and
I'll
we
make
can
that motion.
deal with it. Okay, moved, seconded. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. So
thank you.
You want to make the official motion that we send a letter to the electoral area?
Yes, I'd like to make that motion right now that we send an official letter from the regional district in regards to the necessity of keeping the Similkameen together within the electoral boundaries of the RDOS and all our shared resources. Thank you.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion on this? Go ahead, Director Coyne.
Yeah, just quickly, the plan is to split the Similkameen somewhere over by Karamias. Princeton will go into new riding with, what's it called, Coquihalla. That's gonna go up the West Bank and over to Hope. And then Karamias will be all the way, can't remember how far north it goes, but it's over to like the Kootenays, all the way up the valley. It's crazy big. But we're asking them to stay together. I will be, as mayor, I will also be speaking at their commission once we figure out which one to go to, Pentic and Kelowna. And we will be sending them a letter, and I believe Chief Crow is now going to look at it as well. So.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense to have the bands send letters as well. We supported this at the provincial level, so I don't see why we can't support it at the federal level, but is there any further discussion on it? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any other director's motions? Seeing none. Board members' verbal updates. Anything from anybody to report from their communities? Director Robinson, go ahead.
Just wanted to shout out and a big congratulations to our Penticton Vs. In case you hadn't heard yet, they won the Fred Page Cup yesterday against Nanaimo last night. Outstanding performance. We're so proud of our guys. So go Vs.
Yeah. Congratulations on that. Well done. Director Bush, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we have the Kermis Rodeo Parade this long weekend, Monday. And also, I think there's just barrel racing. There's no actual rodeo, but there is barrel racing. So, yeah, anybody that's bored and nothing to do, come on out to Kermis.
Okay, thank you for that. Director Gettins, anything to report?
Thanks, Chair. I might take up on that. I like barrel racing. I just wanted to do a thank you to the volunteers that we have up in Area F. We did a second wood chipping event, and it was quite successful. Definitely a lot more homes have signed up and dropped off their wood to chip. And that initiative is being led by Margaret Holmes, who's a volunteer in our area, and she's built herself a pretty mighty little team. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And to the staff that came out too, Carrie and Zach, they were great as usual and had lots of information. So thanks again.
Okay, thank you. Any further board members' verbal updates? Director Ober, go ahead.
A thank you to the chair. And yes, 4 items quickly. Number one, building off Director Gettins, we had the chipping event in our neighborhood last week as well. Again, huge success, much appreciated. Bob Coombs is the fellow in our community who led that, but the staff were amazing, and everyone's looking forward to the next one. This is a good program, part of the Fire Smart program. Second, you've heard earlier today, the grocery store in Okanagan Falls is opening today. Thank you to the Bellich family. Everybody here, you're welcome. If you're driving through OK Falls, stop in, check it out. Maybe give a little support if you want to buy something. I'm going to stop there on my way home today. Third, Jennifer Martinson, a community member, put forth a fundraiser for the Ukraine. It happened on May 1. I was sick with COVID, could not attend. But they successfully raised over $20,000 one day in one of our community parks. She has extended a challenge and an offer. The offer is if anybody is interested to learn from her what worked and had success, she will welcome and help anybody who's interested. And she picked up on Oliver. Oliver had an event first, and that's where she got help from Oliver. And the challenge is she's hopeful that someone will be interested. So the challenge is beat us, do better. And the final update is I want to apologize to Director Coyne and every member of this board from a municipality. And I want to make it clear, I do not enjoy, nor did I intend any swipe at any of you. That's not my intent, and I don't enjoy it. And I want to make that clear. My goal was to demonstrate that we're different. That's all, just different. And if you are in our area or you're on a council, not everybody, and I've talked to members of provincial staff and our own staff and others, they don't know the difference. And maybe Director Coyne understands the difference better than most people. But some of the members of this board may not understand the difference as well as those of us who are in the electoral areas sometimes understand. And I want to tell you, we're not all the same. Director Bush will tell you, he doesn't have the same experience that we do. I'm sure Director Coyne, rural Princeton, will tell you the same thing. We're not all the same. We're not. And that was my point. But no disrespect to anybody. I want to make it clear. I apologize sincerely to each and every one of you. I'm going to beg you for your forgiveness. Please. Thank you.
Okay. Any further updates, Director Coyne?
I've got a couple. This weekend, if you like model jets that fly, we have them all weekend at our airport. They're quite the sight to see. They're actual jets that
Just
Regional jets.
miniature?
Yeah, well,
Mod-
miniature, about the size of the table. They'll be flying at the airport all weekend. And then on Thursday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, mining day starts, down in our town square. Copper Mountain Mine comes down, sets up a bunch of booths and usually some equipment, and they explain mining to you. Unfortunately, all the mine tours are filled up already, but that happens in the morning. And then on Friday, Optimi Health will be opening their facility in Princeton officially, so the grand opening of that facility. That's quite the high-tech operation where they'll be growing psychedelic mushrooms for research. So,
Lots going on.
there is.
Thank you for that. Director Holmes, go ahead.
So yeah, last month we had a community fundraiser for Ukraine, and we raised $4,500. So challenge accepted. What do we win?
A free trip, one-way ticket.
All right. Any further verbal updates?
For the losers.
Seeing no hands, looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? We are done. Thanks, everybody.
Have we ever
I'm
had
tempted to
anybody
go and
oppose?
drive.